Before you scroll, just imagine this. A lonely single dad, tired after a 12-hour shift, finally sitting down to eat at a cheap roadside diner, when a stranger's voice behind him whispers, "My son's hungry, can we stay a while?" What he didn't know was that this one simple question would change his life forever, unravel secrets buried for years, and pull him into a truth he never asked for. Right finger smash that subscribe button now so you never miss stories that hit your heart, twist your mind, and keep you hooked right until the last breath. Henry Caldwell never expected his Thursday night to unravel into the kind of story people whispered about for years. He had picked up his 7-year-old daughter Lily from her after-school dance class, bought her the fries she loved, and finally convinced her to sleep after hours of restless questions about whether missing her mom made her a bad kid, which always left a knot in Henry's chest because he never knew how to explain that the woman who gave birth to Lily had walked out when Lily was 2, leaving behind nothing but a ring on the table and a note that simply said, "I can't do this." And so now, 5 years later, Henry spent most evenings alone in the small-town diner off Highway 76, the only place that stayed open after 9 p.m., the place where the waitresses called him sweetheart and the cook knew to put 2 extra pickles on his burger. And this night, this one slow, quiet night, Henry finally thought he'd eat alone in peace, maybe scroll through job listings, because his mechanic shop job was barely paying the bills, and winter was coming and Lily needed a new coat. But just as he lifted the first fry to his mouth, he heard footsteps pause beside him, followed by a voice so soft it sounded like it was afraid of being heard. "My son's hungry, can we stay a while?" And when Henry turned, he saw a woman holding the hand of a small boy, the woman dressed in a coat that looked too thin for the cold, cheeks windburned, eyes red as if she'd been crying, and something deep in Henry, something raw and human, pushed him to nod. But the moment he did, he noticed 3 things. The boy kept glancing at the door like someone might burst through it at any second. The woman's hands were trembling as she slid into the booth across from him, and tucked beneath her coat was something metallic, something she kept gripping like a lifeline. And while Henry tried to start polite conversation, asking where they were headed and whether they'd eaten yet, the woman dodged every question, feeding small bites of her sandwich to her son while barely touching her own. And the boy, who introduced himself as Milo, kept whispering, "Is he gone yet, Mom?" To which she pressed his hand and said, "Just eat, baby." And Henry, despite every instinct telling him not to get involved, felt the familiar ache of someone barely holding their world together, so he pushed his untouched fries toward Milo with a gentle, "You can have them if you want." And when the boy's eyes lit up like no child's eyes should from a simple side of fries, Henry sensed this wasn't just hunger, this was desperation, maybe danger, maybe the kind of trouble people vanish into. So he leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice, asking, "Are you two safe tonight?" And instantly the woman recoiled, pulling Milo closer, as if Henry were the danger, whispering, "We just need to stay for a while, that's all." But Henry wasn't blind. He saw the bruise on her jaw half hidden under her hair, the way Milo flinched whenever the door chimed, and when headlights swept across the diner windows, both mother and son ducked like they'd been trained to hide. And that's when the cook, a man who'd worked there 20 years, came over, muttering to Henry that a truck had been circling the lot twice now, dark blue pickup, engine rumbling like trouble, and Henry, suddenly protective, told the cook to turn off the front lights. And as the diner dimmed, the woman whispered, "Please, don't let him find us." And Henry realized with a slow cold dread that saying yes to a simple question had pulled him into something far bigger than a quiet dinner alone. The second Henry heard the dark blue pickup's door slam outside, something inside him snapped into motion like an instinct older than fear, pushing him to slide out of his booth, lock the diner door, and pull the shades down as the woman, who finally whispered her name was Rachel, begged him not to involve himself because the man outside wasn't just angry, he was dangerous, a man she had spent 8 years trying to keep happy, only to discover too late that behind the charming smile was a violent temper, a jealous paranoia, and secrets involving debts, threats, and people who didn't forgive. And as the footsteps outside approached the glass, Milo started shaking so violently that Henry knelt down, blocking the boy from the window while trying to ask Rachel why she hadn't gone to the police. But her answer came out in fragments. The police chief was her husband's cousin, the department ignored her calls, and last week when she tried to run the first time, the police officer who brought her back told her, "You two need to work things out at home." And now Rachel was convinced the only way out was to disappear entirely, except disappearing with a child was nearly impossible when the man looking for you had money, connections, and fury. And while Henry processed all this, the cook whispered that he kept a bat under the counter for drunks who didn't pay. handing it to Henry, who didn't even like violence but felt his hands tighten around the handle anyway as the shadow outside moved along the window like a wolf circling its prey, until suddenly the door rattled violently, once, twice, 3 times, as the man outside shouted Rachel's name, a voice thick with rage, and Henry positioned himself between the door and the booth where Rachel hugged Milo like she could shield him from the whole world, and then a twist Henry never expected occurred. The man called out, "Rachel, they took the money. I know you're close, just come home and we can fix this." And Henry exchanged a confused look with her, because this didn't sound like a husband begging, it sounded like someone who'd just lost something vital, and Rachel's face drained of all color as she whispered, "He hid money inside Milo's backpack. I didn't know until today. They're after him now, not me," and Henry felt reality tilt as he realized the boy had unknowingly been carrying something criminals wanted, something worth enough to make grown men hunt relentlessly, and just then the parking lot filled with 2 more vehicles, unmarked black SUVs, whose occupants stepped out wearing heavy jackets and the kind of posture that meant business, and the man in the blue pickup panicked, running to them, trying to explain something Henry couldn't hear, but one of the SUV men grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the truck while another scanned the diner windows, spotting movement, raising a hand for the others to spread out, and Henry, thinking fast, whispered for the cook to lead them to the storage room exit while he stayed up front to buy time, but Rachel refused to leave Henry alone, gripping his arm with a strength fueled by terror and gratitude all at once, and Milo whispered, "Are we gonna die?" in a trembling voice that broke something in Henry's chest, pushing him to declare firmly, "Not tonight," even though he wasn't sure how he'd keep that promise, and as the footsteps approached the side door, the cook opened the back exit. With a quiet click, motioning for Rachel and Milo to slip out first toward the woods behind the diner, but before Henry could follow, the front glass shattered inward with a deafening crack as one of the SUV men fired a warning shot, sending shards flying across the floor, and Henry dove behind the counter, praying, begging, for Rachel and Milo to make it far enough into the trees before these men realized the trio was splitting up, and the chapter closed on Henry hearing them shout to each other, "They're running, go around the back." While he tightened his grip on the bat, his heart pounding in his ears, prepared to stall an army if he had to. Henry didn't remember deciding to fight, his body simply moved, fueled by a kind of primal determination he hadn't felt since the night Lily was born, and he realized he would die before letting anything harm her, and as the first man crawled through the shattered window, Henry swung the bat with every ounce of strength in his arms, catching the intruder in the side with enough force to knock him down but not out, yet Henry didn't need to win, he only needed to delay, because outside he could hear Rachel and Milo crashing through dry branches as they ran toward safety, and the leader of the intruders shouted orders, demanding they bring the kid alive. Which confirmed Henry's worst suspicion, that Milo's backpack contained more than just money, something valuable enough that grown men were willing to shatter windows, chase children into the woods, and threaten civilians, and as Henry dodged another attacker, he slid behind the kitchen door and sprinted out the back, determined to catch up to Rachel and Milo before the men in black did, but the woods behind the diner stretched wide and dark, with only moonlight carving pale paths between trees, and Henry followed the sound of Rachel's voice, breathless, panicked, just as she tripped on a root, falling hard while Milo tugged desperately at her hand, and Henry rushed forward to scoop Milo up, urging Rachel to keep moving despite her twisted ankle, guiding them deeper until the shouts behind them softened into distant echoes, and for one fleeting moment Henry thought they'd outrun danger, but then headlights swept across the trees from the far side, illuminating 3 more men closing in from the opposite direction, trapping them in a shrinking pocket of forest, and Rachel whispered in despair, "There's nowhere left," but Henry, scanning the terrain, spotted an old storm drain tunnel half buried in leaves, wide enough for Milo and Rachel to crawl through, so he shoved aside the debris and told them to go, promising he'd be right behind them, even though the tunnel was too small for him to fit, and Rachel knew it too, shaking her head violently, insisting she wouldn't leave him, but Henry, thinking only of Milo's small trembling hands, pushed her gently but firmly, saying, "Your son needs you alive," and with tears streaking down her dirt-covered cheeks, Rachel crawled into the tunnel with Milo, disappearing into darkness just as the men emerged from both sides of the forest, surrounding Henry with flashlights raised, guns drawn, demanding he hand over the boy, but Henry stood tall, exhausted, bleeding from a cut on his temple, gripping nothing but his resolve as he lied through clenched teeth. The boy ran the other way, and when the leader punched him across the jaw for being uncooperative, Henry refused to make a sound, refused to flinch, because every second he bought gave Rachel and Milo one more breath of freedom, and after minutes of searching and finding nothing, the men grew frustrated, realizing the child was gone, the money gone, the leverage gone, eventually retreating back toward their SUVs to regroup somewhere else, leaving Henry bruised, battered, and alone in the cold woods until Rachel crawled back out of the tunnel, crying his name, running to him despite her injury, and Milo hugged him with the kind of gratitude no words could express, and the police, this time federal officers, not the local corrupted ones, arrived within the hour after Rachel used a hidden emergency phone number she'd been too afraid to call before, revealing that her husband's criminal ties went far deeper than anyone knew, and after statements, protection orders, and a long night of paperwork, Henry drove Rachel and Milo home, offering them his couch for the night, which slowly became 2 nights, then a week, then something deeper, until one morning, months later, as Lily braided Milo's hair before school, Rachel looked at Henry with an expression filled with quiet awe and whispered, "You saved us," and Henry, with a soft smile, replied, "You saved me first," realizing that what began as a meal he thought he'd eat alone had rewritten all their lives, turning strangers into a family built not by blood, but by survival, courage, and the simple question that started it all. "My son's hungry, can we stay a while?"